Jumping back right into the action now, one of the biggest topics we saw this week on covering from the GSMC Chip Shot Football podcast that we brought up on the show, now bringing it up once again because we finally got the thoughts of Bryce Young this week on the decision that was made, right? Bryce Young being benched by the Carolina Panthers. A surprise, I think, for a few people, definitely for myself, because I think I saw a report somewhere that said that Bryce Young is now the earliest benched quarterback that was picked number one overall, lasting only about 16 or 14 games or something like that. So I definitely wouldn't have expected it to be him. I felt like they would have just given him more of an opportunity to try and get better. It wasn't looking great at all, obviously, admittedly. The plays weren't working. He wasn't playing great himself either, but I don't know. I felt like it wasn't going to happen after 2 weeks, but that's just me. But now Bryce had a chance to speak about it, about the Panthers' decision to bench him, now going with Andy Dalton as the starter. And just on that topic, Bryce Young, I think based on the kind of quarterback, the kind of person that he is, his responses didn't really surprise me, but still, it was worth bringing up because I think just reacting to it, they were pretty interesting because he said, it's not something I was necessarily expecting. Obviously, not something that was great to hear, but I respect Coach Canales. I respect the organization. They made the decision. Right now, that's the situation that it is. I have to do everything to help the team whatever way I can. And after the decision, he's being very respectful of it, obviously, but afterwards, a lot of people came out on social media to kind of rally around Bryce Young. You had LeBron even coming out and saying something. Chuba Hubbard, Adam Thielen, his teammates as well, stepped up and spoke about, their level of confidence in him and still being supportive of him, knowing that he's going to get over this, right? But kind of deflecting the blame a little bit, at least the way that LeBron put it in his statement. He said that this wasn't on you. And that's how I feel about it. I think that's how a lot of people kind of took the news. Baker Mayfield talked about it and relating it back to his situation with the Browns, the Panthers, and not really the Rams, but, those two situations in particular, saying that he's just really essentially not given an opportunity to succeed. That's basically how I felt. And, he referenced how now, after however many years Baker's been in the league, now he finally feels comfortable in this situation, and it's showing in the way that he's performing. So he also supportive of Bryce Young, saying that this is nowhere near the end for him. He's going to figure it out. But even through all of that, which I feel like is the right mindset to have on this situation, Bryce Young still kind of put the blame on himself pretty much. And I think, again, it goes with the kind of person that he is. He said, at the end of the day, we had a ton of drives, a ton of games that I didn't do enough during that. I look in the mirror and I take accountability for that. For the most part, every snap hit my hands, and I didn't do enough with it at the end of the day, which is true, right? By the position, by fact, by the position, obviously, of quarterback, it is true, right? A lot of how the game goes is dictated on how he plays. But again, you acknowledge that Bryce is being honest there and is being truthful in that sense, right? By keeping it, in terms of blaming himself, acknowledging that he hasn't been great necessarily, just from an individual standpoint. Maybe I haven't watched many Panthers games, obviously, but also watching, maybe you see some plays he made the wrong read. I know he's made a couple bad throws in there as well, but I find it hard within myself to kind of just say that, it's his second year, he should be hitting all throws, right? Especially when last year you had probably a whole different offensive system that you ran, a ton of different coaches and personnel in there each and every day, telling you one thing one year, in your first year, you still trying to figure out what it is to be in the NFL, and then the second year, once you kind of have an understanding of the personal side of everything, then it switches up completely during your work life, and you have another head coach, you have another group of advisors, another group of coaches that are telling you a whole different lesson now. And it's tough. It's tough. I can't really expect him to hit every throw or understand every concept or know what to audible out of, what kind of looks work versus this defense or this other defense. I can't expect him to know all of that just in his second year, just because it is his second year. It's not the same group of guys, helping him out. They might have brought a couple more people. That's a start with offensive linemen and Deontay Johnson and these guys, but like I said, it's only the start of it. It's not the finished picture whatsoever. This team was still going to struggle, but I don't think they really handled it adequately in this situation. It just feels like a panicked decision overall to me, because you acknowledge what Bryce is saying, but also I feel like they themselves, like I said, haven't really done everything possible to make it happen for him. For example, like the first two games, the Panthers ran the ball 38 times in that game. And again, it goes with the ebbs and flows, obviously, of you're down like 20 points or like 15 points. You're not going to run the ball that often, right? That makes sense. But still, you look at how many times their opponents have run the ball. 38 times, like I said, for the Panthers, 81 for their opponents in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, the disparity is nearly 50 in the amount of times that their opponents run the ball and the Panthers, right? I understand that if it's not working, it almost feels crazy to just keep trying and get stuffed or keep trying and lose like 2 yards, which is reasonable, right? But still, like I said with Caleb Williams, it's almost bigger than just the game, right? You're going to struggle. You might not be one of the best teams, certainly for the Panthers, but it's bigger because you have, the guy, the presumable guy for your franchise, right? You drafted him first overall. You can't mess that up, because to mess it up and mess this young man's career up and not have him work out as you would have liked, now you have to start the whole thing over again. If you bring in another guy, and you have to hope that at that time it works again, right? And through the years, right, of trying it over again a couple times, you're still one of the worst teams in the NFL, and that just can't happen for an organization, right? You have to try and find some success, but you can't if you just keep restarting this entire thing, right? That's where running the ball is more big picture, right? You got to try and protect this young player at some point somehow by running it a couple times, and maybe it works some games. More often than not, it might not, but still, you don't have guys in his face. You don't have guys tackling him or sacking him close to 5 to 6 times each game. And that way, his decisions get rushed. He feels rushed. He gets a little bit antsy. He puts his head down to just try and run away instead of, keeping his head up, looking for options and diagnosing what he sees. He's not learning at that point, right? He's just kind of reacting, and that's the last thing you want, right? You want to get better. You want to see this quarterback get better, and it's not working out like that. That's why it's more on the organization, right? Adam Thielen kind of shared those thoughts and said that it's on everyone, right? It's not just Bryce, knowing the fact that he hasn't played great either, but to me, it's just mostly on that. The pressure to kind of relieve it off of Bryce hasn't been done efficiently enough by the Panthers, right, if that makes sense, by running it or doing more in the offseason to find ways to help him out and be successful. And you can kind of look at it, I was also thinking about this before, of a way like benching him kind of just protects him from everything, right? If it's not going great and you kind of acknowledge the fact that you did a bad job, maybe benching him, you at least prevent him from getting worse, right? But it just doesn't look good because you're admitting the fact that you kind of messed this up, right? That's why, again, it to me, it just falls more on the Panthers at this point, kind of knowing that they messed up. And whether or not now you start thinking about it, it was inevitable, that the question would come up, right? Can they go back to Bryce Young now at some point this year, or can it go as far as saying that Bryce should just want to move on to some other team, right? Because he knows that maybe the Panthers just isn't the home for him long term. And to those two questions, I would think that I wouldn't like the Panthers to go back to Bryce, because I am already anticipating that the Panthers are still going to be bad. Maybe not like losing by 40 points bad, but still this is a team building roster issue rather than just switching the guy at quarterback. I don't think it's that easy. I still expect the Panthers to struggle. And to go back to Bryce, I feel like that's just like so unnecessary at this point. You might as well just stay with Andy Dalton at this point, unless Bryce is blowing you away in practice and just looking like a completely different guy, maybe. But still, I wouldn't go. He never should have been starting right away. That's how I feel about it. Like, Drake May still was on the bench. I feel like Bryce should have been doing the same thing. So I don't think they should go back to him. And whether or not he gets traded, or he asked for a trade, that's where I think this opportunity now to kind of sit and watch can get him a good look at what he's dealing with, right? Maybe he's not seeing things on the field as clearly, so seeing it from the sidelines, from the iPads that they have on the field, right? He gets a good look of what the play should be, how it's supposed to be run, and how the receivers break in and out of their routes, how it's all supposed to look from an outside perspective, and now really get a chance to learn rather than just being thrown out there and kind of expected to take this thing and run with it, right? Now he'll get a better look at that, and if he decides that, this situation really isn't what I want it to be for my career, then I think he can make a better estimation of whether or not he wants to ask out already. I would be pretty shocked by that, but still, I'm not taking anything for granted in a sense. I think anything could happen now. I didn't think he would be benched, and he was. So going forward, I don't think I'd be too surprised with whatever happens next with this Panthers organization and Bryce as a player. But again, very unfortunate to see Bryce be benched already, but in no way am I thinking that, he's done or he's a bust or anything like that. I really have to see him somewhere where I think most people can understand that it is a good situation for him to grow, and the Panthers haven't been that for him thus far. So that is where the Bryce situation is right now. What he had to say about it as well, I thought was pretty interesting. But now we can move forward, and yesterday's segment, I kind of went through half of the slate from week 3. Now we have part 2 coming up after this break, predicting some of the winners in the remainder of the games from Sunday, and we're going to go through it, give my picks, and why I believe these teams will win on Sunday. That is coming up. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.